guys, I'm actually very happy to be filming today's video because it's gonna unlock a lot of different topics, like a lot of new topics that we're gonna be able to talk about on the channel from now on, because finishing this series of videos on the resources that I used for each level of the JLPT was actually very important to me to do in that order. So I have like loads of topics that I want to cover next, and in fact stay tuned until the end of today's video, guys, because I'm going to be asking you what you want to hear about next in priority in between all of those topics. Minasan konnichiwa, Ali desu. Hi everyone, my name is Ali. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about all of the study resources that I've used in order to prepare for the JLPT N1 exam. But before we dive into the study resources that I've used, let's just do a quick recap. So what is the JLPT? The JLPT stands for the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. Its levels range from the level N5, which is the lowest, to the level N1, which is the highest. When did I pass the JLPT N1? I got my certificate from the July 2023 session of the JLPT, and I sat that exam in Japan. When did I start studying Japanese? I started learning Japanese seriously in 2019. So it took me 4 years to sit the exam, the JLPT N1, and I got it on my first try. And then last question, how much time did it take me to prepare for the JLPT N1? So if I count from the first time that I opened a resource that was labeled to be for the JLPT N1 level, then it was at the end of 2021, at the end of the year 2021, so it was in November, and from that point until July 2023, so in total around 2 years of focused preparation. But then I also want to add that in today's video I'm going to present all of the study resources that I've used in between that period of time, but obviously you also need to consider that all of the resources that I had used prior to that also helped me build on my knowledge of the language, and obviously I didn't study for the JLPT N1 in a vacuum, so all of the language immersion I've done on the side and language production exercises that I've also done before and during that time were helpful on the day of the exam. So really I want you to keep that in mind, because I don't think that, for instance, if you guys were to use the exact same resources that I've used and which I will present today, you will be necessarily successful at the exam. I think this is a general statement that covers the entirety of my channel. The tools that you use don't matter. What matters is how you use the tools. So keep that in mind. And without further ado, let's start on the recap of the N1 resources that I've used. Alright guys, so first of all, for those of you who have seen the previous videos in this series, you would have noticed that in the previous videos, I have categorized the resources that I presented you per language skills: grammar resources, vocab resources, immersion resources, so on and so forth. But in today's video, and because my preparation for that exam for the JLPT N1 eventually took much longer than my study preparation for all of the previous levels of the JLPT, I thought that today I would present you the resources by phases in which I used them. So by that I mean that I actually studied for the JLPT N1 following 4 phases. So right at the beginning, from the end of 2021 until probably the middle of 2022, I did what I called the discovery phase. For me, the discovery of what the level was about. Alright, the first resource I used was the Bunpo App, the N1 level of the app. I have been a fan of the Bunpo app since I started using it in 2020. It has helped me prepare for each level of the JLPT. It's an amazing resource. I really recommend. You know, the most beneficial aspect of this resource is that it gives you loads of exercise questions, testing you on your understanding of the grammar structures that it is teaching you. So I think that this is probably one of the most interactive and easy to follow study resource that you can find right now on the market for Japanese language. This app is only focused on grammar and it does a great job at it, in my opinion. The second resource I actually used on my iPad, and it was the Nihongo Soumatome Bunpo N1. And so I used the Soumatome there fairly quickly. It took me only a few weeks to complete, and I really only used it as like I said, an introduction to probably the most prominent grammar points that I needed to know for the level. Do I recommend this resource or not? If you want to use it just like the way I did, which is to give you an introduction, like really introductory knowledge about the grammar points that you're going to encounter at this level, then I would recommend. If you want a comprehensive resource that's going to help you study the N1 grammar points in depth, then I wouldn't recommend. The next resource I used was the Authentic Japanese textbook. I have put it there because I did use this textbook while I was preparing for the JLPT N1, and I did an entire video on this textbook. So if you're interested to know, the details about it and my whole review of this textbook, even though that video that I produced is quite old now, I would still recommend you to go and watch it if you're interested. Whether or not I would recommend using it for the JLPT N1, not necessarily, because it's not necessarily a resource that is going to prepare you for the exam. However, it contains, I would say, a significant amount of vocab words that you will find in a vocabulary list of the JLPT N1. So it's definitely a helping resource, I want to say. And then the last resource that I used during the discovery phase was the Nihongo no Mori app, and specifically the N1 level video courses on vocabulary. You're gonna hear a lot about the Nihongo no Mori app in today's video because this is the primary resource that I have used to prepare for the JLPT N1, and of course I recommend it. Obviously, I love this resource. I've been loving the Nihongo no Mori YouTube channel, which is entirely free since 2019, so since the first year that I've been learning Japanese, and I have loved it ever since. And every bit of content that they've put out there so far, so the company that is behind Nihongo no Mori, every bit of content that they have created in between, I have enjoyed just as much. And I used their app from 2021 all the way to the start of 2023. So concerning the vocab courses in particular, I remember that there were a lot, but that they were really useful. So the courses are entirely in Japanese language. The explanations are also in Japanese, which is obviously what you want, especially at this level. You want Japanese courses taught in Japanese if you're going to use courses to study the language. And the particular courses that they have on the app are really amazing. I have really no bad points that comes to mind regarding those courses. They're just amazing. I remember that the main thing that I loved about them was that the teacher would prop up sentences that you would ask yourself how to complete with the right vocab words at each lesson. So that was really useful because then at every single lesson you would test your own understanding. I always like when courses do that, when they test your understanding at a very regular pace, because it means that you're constantly engaging your memory recall. You definitely have better chances of remembering it. So really useful. I recommend. Then I had a phase 2, which I called like serious studying, which was definitely from the middle of 2022 until the end of 2022. I started this phase 2 by covering the Dokkai part of the video courses on the Nihongo no Mori app, which was about reading comprehension. I remember having a great time too. There were significantly less courses in that part of the app for the N1 preparation course. At the time I used it anyway, but it was nonetheless very useful to go through those video courses because in each video the teacher gave a text of different length, since you have that at the exam. And so for each length of text, the teacher went through the entire text, read it out loud, answered the question with you, and then gave you tips on how to read effectively at the exam and how to answer the questions properly. Like like really tips about efficiency during the exam, how to manage your time, and also how to approach the different types of questions, the different types of texts. Really useful overall. Then I use the Try N1 for N1 grammar. Again, this is an exercise book. I have been using the Try resources since level N3 or N4. Essentially, because this is an exercise book, it also has some explanation parts, but I mostly use it as an exercise book, let's say. And in the way I have approached grammar so far in Japanese, I have proceeded by layers, with sort of stages there. And so I would always start with the Somatome and the Bunpo app first, and then complete all of that, everything that I had learned using those resources, using the Try resource as a sort of third step in the process. So for the level N1, I also did that. I also used the Try resource at that point in time once I was done with the first two resources. And so it served the purpose that I wanted it to serve, which is that it helped me to crystallize the knowledge that I had accumulated about the N1 grammar points up until that point. So I would recommend. Then I have used once again the Somatome series, but this time the Dokkai, so the reading comprehension book in the series for N1 level. I am a big fan of the Somatome reading comprehension series of books for each level of the JLPT because I think that they are actually a great preparation for the exam. One very good point that they have going for themselves, those books, is that the layout of the pages is pretty much the same exact layout that you will find at the exam on the actual sheet of paper that you will be distributed the day of the exam. So this is really useful if you use it pretty early during your study preparation of the exam. It is, I think, a very good way for you to get used very early on to the format of the exam and the kind of questions that you will be asked. It's really not about theory. This one is really a practice book, so I would heartily recommend. This one was no exception, the one for N1 level. And then from that point on, I basically dived into the rest of the video courses that were available on the Nihongo no Mori app. So I went through the kanji courses, which took me, I think, in total over a year, in fact, to complete. So I had started to go through those courses probably 6 months prior to that. It was constantly in the background, and I did go through every single video course that was available on the app. Then I went through the grammar courses on the app. Then I went through the Chokai courses, so the listening comprehension part. And then finally, once I was done with every single video course that was available on the app, I went through the模試試験 part of the app, 2 mock exams that you could go through inside the app and get feedback on automatically. Great content on this app. And so if I were to summarize the entirety of the N1 contents on the Nihongo no Mori app, I would say that they were spot on, practical, useful, efficient, and that I would recommend them 100%. Trust me, guys, this is money well spent if you want to use this app. It has in it every element that I recommend myself to the people I coach for their Japanese learning, because most of the time what is lacking from learners' routines, study routines, is the interactivity aspect, and this app has the interactivity aspect. So even beside all of the other reasons that I just gave, for that reason only, I would still recommend the app 100%. Then I had a third phase, which was my knowledge reinforcement phase, which lasted from, I would say, the start of 2023 or even like just before that, so the end of 2022 till mid-2023. I used a total of 3 resources during phase 3 of my exam preparation. And the first one was this one, which is the Yoku wa Karu 日本語能力試験 N1 合格テキスト5位 N1 level vocab book by the Yoku wa Karu series. I didn't give any stars so far to any of the resources that I presented you guys, but if I were to give a star rating to this textbook, it would definitely be a 5-star. Once again, it had all of the elements which I particularly enjoy finding in study resources, which is that it has great categories. It is not necessarily linear in the progression of what it teaches you. It draws your attention to very specific points about Japanese vocab that you need to know for the level N1 that you wouldn't necessarily notice by yourself. So in that sense, it is very, very useful. It really acts as a private tutor, if that makes sense for you. And really, it's not only a book that has loads of vocab lists. It makes sense and it was really effective on me. And so for that reason, I would even tell you that now, looking back on all of the study resources that I've used for Japanese over the years, the Yoku Wakaru book series is, in my opinion, a very good contestant to the quality of the Shinkansen Master series. In terms of quality of the contents and the comprehensiveness of the resource, those two series of textbooks and exercise books are at the same level. And in fact, the next book that I used was the Shinkansen Master for Dokkai, for reading comprehension. And that one was absolutely wonderful. It was definitely up a notch in terms of level of difficulty compared to the Somatome for the same thing, the reading comprehension. But then again, it's spot on. It prepares you very, very well for what's coming for you at the exam. So in my opinion, this is also a 100% recommend that I would give you. But I also want to draw your attention to the fact that it took me a significant amount of time to go through this resource. Really, you have to focus on it for a long time. It's a long-term commitment. If you decide to use this resource, I've got it right here. If you decide to use this resource, it's definitely a long-term commitment. It is quite thick. It has, let me check, almost 200 pages worth of content. You definitely get a lot of value from it, but I'm just saying, be prepared. Be prepared. And then the last resource that I used during that phase, the phase 3, was once again a book from the Yoku Wakaru book series, which is the one for grammar. And this one, in fact, I have used during phase 2 when I was studying grammar again and again. I used this resource to just sort of check my understanding, have a different kind of explanation for each grammar point, especially the ones I struggled with. And then during phase 3, I essentially went through the entirety of the book, and as you can see, it is quite heavily bookmarked, and this is because this book is, to me, a reference book that I need to keep in my collection, because the grammar points that are covered in the N1 level are definitely thick, and you definitely need a long time to process them. And even though I have got the JLPT N1 level now, and I've got the certificate, it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is mastery of the language, and to achieve mastery and full fluency in the language, there are points in there that I still need to review and to revise, and so this is why I keep this book as reference book. So this one I won't be discarding, in fact. Whether or not I recommend it to prepare for the JLPT N1, to be honest with you, not really. This book is quite linear in its progression, and it's really only a textbook, almost. It has some practice questions here and there, but it's not a practice book. It's not enough. Like I said, using it as a reference book worked super great for me, but I wouldn't have been able to study the grammar points needed for N1 from scratch using that book. Not in a million years. Then I had one last phase right before the exam, which was phase 4, and which was my exam prep phase right before sitting the exam in July 2023. And that last phase really lasted only a few weeks, from probably April all the way to July. I have got 6 resources that I've used during that time. And so in order, I used the とりあえず日本語能力試験対策 N1 Dokkai. So this is a practice book focused on reading comprehension. Once again, it's got 5 sections in it, and each of the section is worth an entire reading comprehension section that you will have at the exam. So essentially you have a reading comprehension section mock exam 5 times in the book. And in my opinion, it was a great preparation for me to do a last kind of brush up on my reading comprehension right before the exam and before I started on the mock exams that I went through. It is extremely simple, straight to the point, and very efficient. So for that reason, I would recommend. This was the first and only book that I've used in that series, the Todai series, so I wouldn't be able to tell you whether the other books are useful, but the one that I used for reading comprehension level N1 was great. Next resource that I used was the 日本語パワードリル N1 文字と語彙, which I've got right here. Preparation book for the vocab and kanji section of the JLPT. It has more than 500 questions and it's got 30 days worth of preparation, which is meant to be done like right before the exam, but I used it a bit earlier simply because I wanted to go through actual like entire mock exams right before the exam. So I used this earlier in my preparation, but still during phase 4. And actually, I will couple this with this book in the same series, which is the one about grammar preparations. Really, really useful, very efficient. They serve the exact purpose that I wanted them to serve. So whether or not I recommend them, the answer is yes, I do recommend them heartily. I like the Power Doriru series. I think they are really straightforward, straight to the point, very efficient, and they really prepare you very well for the day of the exam. So there you go, guys. Next resource was the Migii app. So the Migii app might have single-handedly helped me pass this exam when I sat it, because I started using that app to do loads of vocab drills right before sitting the exam, so perhaps from 1 month prior to the exam. And had I not done that, I'm not sure I would have passed the exam because my vocab skills were still too limited, too low. Even though I had gone through, as you saw until now, quite a few resources on vocab, it was still not enough because the amount of vocab that you need to know for that exam, for the JLPT N1, is absolutely unparalleled. And so I definitely underestimated the amount of time that it would take me to acquire that vocab. Nonetheless, thanks to the help of this app, I was able to quickly close the gap here and bring my vocab knowledge up to the level that it needed to be at, or at least giri right before I sat the exam. So I mostly used the vocab quizzes on the app, but I also used the mock exam functionalities on the app, and I did pay a subscription for that, with my own money, of course. I also used the Todai app to go through mock exams on there, the Todai app and website, in fact, to go through free mock exams of the JLPT N1 on there, like I've done for pretty much all the other levels of the JLPT to test myself. And finally, I went through the 3 mock exams contained in this book, which is the JLPT Riaru Moshi, which is a book that contains only mock exams, 3 of them. And I would heartily recommend to go through this book or the other ones in the series that are available for the other levels of the JLPT, because the quality of these mock exams is exactly the same as the one that you will find on the actual test day. So if you want a spot-on preparation, I would really recommend you to use this series of books. And finally, you guys, to conclude today's video, let me share with you the immersion resources I have used all throughout the 4 phases of my preparation towards the exam. I mostly use those 3. So for listening immersion, I mostly use the New Speaks channel on YouTube as well as Chan's channel. And then for reading immersion, I mostly read articles of the Nikkei Journal. And I should also note that I used these 2 vocab reference books as well, but I never actually finished using those, and they mostly served as reference books for me. And with that, you guys, that concludes the recap of all the resources that I have used to prepare for the exam. I have gone quite quickly on each resource that I've presented today because I didn't want today's video to be too long. But if you guys have particular questions about any of the resources that I've presented today, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. I always look at the comments, as you guys know. Apart from this, you guys, I just wanted to give you my top 3 resources from the ones that I presented you today. Resources that were really my favorite ones and also the ones that I found the most efficient out of all of them. In first position, you will definitely have the Nihongo no Mori app. In second position, I would put the Yoku Wakaru book series, the vocab book that I presented you today, but also the one for reading comprehension. And this one I couldn't present you because I used it, in fact, quite recently after I sat the JLPT exam. And really those two I have loved using, so for that reason I put them in second position. And then finally, the last resource that I would really recommend you to use is the Migii app. So guys, that concludes today's video. So like I said at the beginning of the video, let me tell you what next topics I would want to talk to you about, and please let me know in the comments which topic you would want me to cover first, and I would definitely take your suggestions into consideration. So there are specifically 3 topics that I want to cover next, now that we've covered all of the resources that I've used for each level of the JLPT, and those topics are, as a JLPT N1 holder, reflecting on each level of the JLPT and what I found were the challenges of each level of this exam, ranking all of the study resources that I have used from day 1 of my Japanese learning since 2019. That should be a pretty interesting video, I hope. And then the last topic that I really want to cover is this time more about what I wish I had known about study resources for the Japanese language before starting to study the language. Out of these 3 topics, just let me know in the comments which one you want me to prioritize for the next video. Alright you guys, so I think that's gonna be it for today. Thank you for watching today's video. Thank you for tuning in. And as for me, I will see you in my next video on the channel. それではまた次の動画でお会いしましょう。バイバイ。またね。Oh my god, you guys, I made a mess. Let me just take all of the resources and show you guys. I've got so many. This is a mountain of resources. Oh my god. Alright, look at that. I mean, I grabbed everything that I could, but actually, not even half of them were resources that I presented you guys today. Like, I don't know, I just didn't look at the details. Anyway, I gotta bring this back onto the bookshelves now. Oh my god, this is so heavy. Help me guys, send help. We've been talking about so